battalion commander relieved the business.
Because he was the safety officer.
He was in
He's the
charge
transport.
of that activity. The infantry asked him to ask for a clearance to fire. He gave the clearance to fire without properly checking the impact zone of where the mortars were going to land. There were people in the impact area. People were killed. See, we traversed the impact area during all this stuff. Danger. We had a road right down the middle of the impact area. So we'd operate there, so that's so you could get the ammunition fired in the impact areas. We were all in the middle of the impact area. So it's a fairly sporty course.
It's pretty sporty. Would you be standing around watching watching a battery in action, for example, might one of the sergeants or the captain or the lieutenant, the exec, come up to you and ask your advice on anything?
No.
How about when you got together with your battalion?
I didn't do it. I didn't operate that way. The way I operated, I'd go in a position area, watch what they were doing, and how did they occupy the position, and what were they doing. And if I was, of course, obviously, in any artilleryman, if there's an unsafe act, you got to do something about an unsafe act. But in the main, it wasn't a question of going out there for the business of interrupting what they were doing. The question was to observe the quality of training. Are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? Are you getting the position put in? Is it silent? Are you getting your rounds off on time? Fire direction moving rapidly to compute solutions? The general tenor of activity, did they get lost moving from one place to another? They come in on time? What was the disposition? They start digging in when they're supposed to dig in? How did they handle the ammo, stacking it properly? Stand behind a piece during a fire mission? Not interrupting the business, just watching it and trying to apply judgments about is the unit well trained or not. And they were well trained. Now, different in running these live fire operations. Live fire operations put an enormous burden on two guys, Jerry Grant Root, who was my S3, and me. Because we went through every one of those things, and there was 9 of them in a year, 10 of them in a year with the Cav Squadron. I'll just give you an example. Cav Squadron Battalion was commanded by an officer who had been an advisor in Vietnam. And we were coming in with artillery and Cobras firing simultaneously with mortars, and the arrival of slicks with a company of troops. And I was standing by this guy behind him while he was making and I was doing the safety checks, but he was making all these decisions. The guy was having difficulty managing that. And I said, you were in Vietnam, but you never were involved in an air mobile operation? I mean, it's piece of cake stuff. I said, I was never that because I was only an advisor in Vietnam. We never got in air mobile operations in the sector I was advisor in. So there was a tutorial about that. We'd gone through tutorials about how to do it, but this guy had never done that. He was a lieutenant colonel and never done it. Piece of cake for people that had done it before, but when you got artillery rounds in the air and you're going to call them off X seconds before the Cobras come in, Y seconds before you're going to call those off, Y seconds before the other stuff lands. You also got smoke on the LZ, and you got white smoke to wherever, so competency of conducting the kinds of operations that we might have to go and conduct if we had to go to war. So those things were strenuous. Keep your wits about you because you could kill people. Because Croson told us go do the real McCoy. And he said, you are the safety officer for the division. Yeah, it's pretty simple direction.
How did everybody practice for Cobras, mortars, artillery, infantry?
Well, you'd go out and rehearse the operation on dry work beforehand to get the coordination timing points down. But when we got ready to go, and that was left to the battalion commanders, obviously, to go schedule that preparatory training, to the infantry battalion commanders to go schedule preparatory training. Guys like Elton were busy supervising all that, and we got into real live fire game, got pucker time.
Yes.
But we had a competent division. Knew how to shoot bullets. Everybody knew how to shoot bullets. Guys like Steiner and other people who were battalion commanders in those particular days, good work. Competent guys. Seen combat in Korea or in Vietnam, so they knew what they were doing.
This time, I guess maybe a lot of your company and battery commanders had been in Vietnam also.
No, a lot of them had not been. You bet. And so a lot of people in fire direction centers hadn't been there.
Yeah.
NCOs had been there. Very robust NCO corps. So a lot of people would be trained, no doubt about it. A lot of forward observers have never done that before because they just come out of West Point in 1972 or 73 or ROTC or whatever, so they're all newbies to the scene. Saw one of those kids over in the War College last week. I gave a class over there, and this guy was over there. He'd been a lieutenant. Came to work as his first duty assignment. They remembered we spent a lot of time in the field, shot a lot of bullets. Now he's an ex-battalion commander going to the National War College. Doing fine.
What's his name?
Ned Spahn, S-P-O-H-N.
I go out there from time to time. How about a head break?
Sure. Help yourself.
Thank you.
Ideas?
Yeah, leadership techniques or gunnery techniques or fire massing or?
Well, we, in every case of, we used to do all of our testing of our battalion, sort of a battalion test. We do it off post, and frequently we do them down at Fort McClellan, Alabama. And what we do is we parachute into Fort McClellan. This gave us a chance to rig our stuff. Parachute into Fort McClellan. Went through all the interaction with the U.S. Air Force in order to get the airplanes allocated, loaded, jumped. And we take an infantry platoon with us down there, infantry company with us down there, and run an integrated operation back and forth through the field at the range at Pelham Range at Fort McClellan. And on all those cases, we'd always select a section which would do a direct fire, Killer Junior kind of deal. So all of the sections had to keep up with the Killer Junior routine, direct fire, learn how to shoot direct fire, and learn how to shoot Killer Junior stuff. Poop out around out there a couple of 100 meters in order to stop from getting overrun. So we had a best battery game going, and we also had a best section game going in order to foster gunnery competence at the section chief level.
How would you?
I guess the I look back on my roots in the 11th Airborne Division, and one of the first things I did when I got there is I said, this is back in June of '73, I said, to Granrood and Halliday, because they'd been in the division quite a bit longer than I had. And when was the last time we had a gunnery exam, gunner's test? And they said, not in the happy memory of man, and I said, okay, we'll have one in 30 days in Towel Stadium, I'll be down there to supervise the thing. And that created a little notoriety as to all the officers would have to take this thing. And the instruction I gave them is you keep taking it until you make expert on it. It didn't make me feel bad because I'd done that when I was a lieutenant. So I didn't lose any sleep about doing it. And I remember I had one battery commander say he wasn't going to take it, and I said, you know, it's okay, you don't have to take the test, but I'll tell you, and I want you to stand up for your principal base. But the day after we take the test and you aren't there, you won't be the battery commander anymore. Because I got a set of principles. You got to know your hardware. And I'd been mindful of Jack Vesey winning his Distinguished Service Cross as an artillery lieutenant colonel when he babysat a artillery battalion, and they got overrun, and he ended up with a sergeant firing beehive on the piece. So it was important to me to have people know their hardware. Obviously the captain showed up, took the test, and passed it, and he came up to me later and said, you know, you did me a courtesy. I mean, much later. You did me a courtesy because I really didn't know that piece like I knew the M101A1, which had been the standard artillery piece. This is M102, which is a little howitzer, which is relatively new to the airborne. Seen service in Vietnam, but he hadn't seen service with that weapon in Vietnam. So I think that we got off to the right foot, saying we got some standard to maintain around here. We'll be sure we did that. So if there were any leadership tricks, I don't know what they were. I didn't try any. Or wasn't. That's not my style. I'm not
Well, this is
a trickster. I just my view is demonstrate competence and you're in good shape. I did one thing which sort of was an interesting thing from the Corps commander's point of view. We had a personnel inspection. And this team came down from the Department of the Army, inspected the personnel of the DeVarty, and we found out of the 2,200 people in the DeVarty, we had 3 of them out of position from MOS and grade qualification. And about 3 weeks later, they came down and hit one of my buddies in another brigade, and he had 1,000 out of position. This was much later in the tour. In fact, Tackleberry by this time had taken over as division commander. And it was by serendipity that I'd gotten tired of overstrengths in one battalion and understrengths in another battalion in terms of grade, so I just leveled it all out in a session on a Saturday and Sunday, much to the chagrin of battery commanders and first sergeants.
You move people.
Move people.
Did it involve a lot of people?
Yeah, I moved probably 300 people. And I moved them because the mafia had taken over. That is to say, the personnel mafia, and this guy had been in this battalion for 4 years, and he had been promoted in rank, and everybody's way over grade in his particular job. Meanwhile, the next door neighbor was under grade and all that. So we just leveled it out. Well, leveling it out in a place like the 82nd is not hard. I mean, if you were the DeVarty is so close. I mean, people have served in the other battalion anyway. Right now it's a regiment, so it doesn't matter that much. It's just a matter of breaking up the cliques and putting them in the right job, in the right billet. Well, Corps commander got the report that I had, I don't know, less than 10 in the wrong position. He got the next report, there was 1,000 in the wrong position. He went 8, couldn't believe it. So I had to explain to Tackleberry how that was done. He said, well, you have to teach a class to your fellow brigade officer. I said, give me a break now. I'm not, all these guys know how to do that. If they want to do that, they'll do it. Just tell them to go do it. But I'm not going to get up there and teach Elton and Jim Lindsay and anybody else, Sandy Malloy, how to straighten out their personnel system. They know how to do that. If they want to do it, they will. So I don't think I had any gimmicks by leadership. It was we had a good operation and went fine.
In light of what happened to that battalion in Vietnam, where you had some switching around, I guess it's a totally different thing, isn't it? 'Cause people are all about the same competence level, but the personal relationships, the trust and so forth.
I think it's different. I think it was done in all one fell swoop. It wasn't done with the notion that they were on deroses or anything like that, getting ready to leave the unit. They were moving from. I told my battalion commanders, I'm going to straighten out this personnel situation. See, because send requisition up, you wouldn't get anybody back because you're already overstrength in that billet. So wasn't doing anything to help battalion commanders get their
People they needed.
well, the C ratings and all that kind of stuff. When you looked at those things, you had, in the aggregate, they've already had the requisite number of people. They were just in the wrong battalions because they'd grown up like that, and that was sort of the history of where they'd been. So I just straightened all that out. So when Carl Bono arrived, he didn't have to do that.
Was this a result of like maybe 3 or 4 years of
Well, several. Certainly it existed before my time.
accumulated?
See, the 82nd has a group of people that homestead there.
Right, they keep coming back.
And therefore, they would try to get back in the same battalion. So it was what I call a laissez-faire personnel system. And so I just straightened out the personnel system.
When did this unit readiness report come in?
I was there from the day I got there.
Mid-60s or something like that? Was it?
I don't know,
It was pre-Vietnam, I was trying.
I don't know. I wasn't with the troops, so I couldn't tell you that.
Yeah, right.
But we had a monthly 2162 or whatever the number of the report is, we had to turn in. Ralph Halliday was my maintenance guy, and we'd screw around with that. The other, you sort of say, well, what sort of things you did in leadership? One of the things I tried to do in leadership is set an example of excellence. I recall we had really old, aged Gamma goats. And when the Fritz went up and got the Department of the Army to issue us a new set of Gamma goats, they'd been dropped so many times and banged around and all that kind of stuff, and these Gamma goats were going to go to the National Guard. They were in foul shape. So I took a guy and told him his job was to fix up all the Gamma goats, put a production line together, and fix the Gamma goats so that when they were turned over to the National Guard, they would be as close to new as they could be, given it didn't bankrupt the division to repair them. In other words, they were all banked up, and the tailgates didn't work very well because you had to load ammo on them. They get banged up in a parachute heavy drop, and so we repainted them all.
Who was this guy who told him to do this?
Guy named German.
Was he on the DeBarty staff?
He was on the DeBarty staff.
What did he use for assets, people to do this? Did you have to?
Well, we went battalion by battalion because we were going to do every one of the Gamma goats is going to depart and get brand new ones. So we set up a line, and each one of the battalions had, when they got their turn to go through the line, they had to provide the necessary labor to get that done. National, and that harked back to my time as a lieutenant when I took over an Honest John unit. I went over to draw the unit from another guy that already had it. And I'll never forget it as long as I live. The battery commander said, I know what every one of these pieces of equipment will do, and I'm giving you the best, because you don't know anything about it. I can make the rest of it work. You're getting the best launcher, the best 5-ton, the best wrecker, the best pole trailer, the best wind set, which is used to measure the wind velocity. And he said, what are the bumper numbers you want on this outfit? And he sprayed the bumper numbers on them while I was waiting. Never forgot that. So when I said, this guy's name was Link German. I said, Link, you know, you're gonna, when we turn this over to the National Guard, put the bumper numbers on it too, whatever they want on the bumper numbers. It's gonna be clean, they're gonna be painted, all the canvas is gonna be fixed, everything's gonna be there, the very best of our ability, 10, 20 standards, and get it ready to return it. In the maintenance side, I wanted to make sure my howitzers all stayed in good shape. So I went up to the Fort Bragg post maintenance shops. And I walked in the maintenance shop and I said, where's the foreman here? This was the artillery fire control maintenance shop. So the senior guy, civilian, been there 30 years. And I said, I'm the diverting commander here and I need your help. And he said, what can I help you with? I said, well, I believe you need, I said, first of all, I'm a graduate of the ordnance school. Oh, you are? Well, boy, gee, that's very good. I said, now, when's the last time the diverting commander came in to see you? I said, I ain't seen a diverting commander here in 20 years. I said, well, let me tell you what I like to do. You know, we have to go out and jump this stuff all the time, gets banged up, but more importantly, when we go to combat, you're not going with me. So I need for you to transfer some of your maintenance skill to some of my own people. So I got 54 howitzers, and there are 52 weeks in a year. I'd like for you to take a howitzer a week, fix it up. I said, by the way, that'll give you some good marks for work done and post-maintenance. Yeah, you're right about that. I said, I'll also send you the sergeant and the howitzer crew, and they'll work up here for a week. And you'll teach them how to make sure they can fix this stuff if it gets broken in the field, if we have to go to work. I said, boy, I like that. So we'd cycle a howitzer through a month. So in our week, we never had a problem with howitzers. The post-maintenance, not a problem. Went down, spent all our time oiling up the, in my role as a division safety guy there for live fire shoots, oiled up the range facility, so we got well in with the fellows on the range. And so we didn't have any problems with that.
Where did you
Now, you know, you say, I don't charge that up as leadership, I just charge that up as trying to gain resources for the unit.
They swim together, don't they?
Well, yeah, I think so.
Where did you teach your people to do killer juniors and direct fire? Did you have a range for that?
Well, we had OP6, I believe, is where there's a sort of a range you can put directly, you can do some direct fire on, where you can, plenty of space out there in case you miscalculate. So there's plenty of range at Fort Bragg for doing all that. One other thing that happened in the fall of the year 1973, which I think is sort of important. Croson called me in his office. And he said to me, you are in charge of the Pop Warner Football League.
That's little kids, is that like Little League?
Little kids who want to play football. And I said, certainly you're not talking to me. I said, one is I tried to get quarters on this post and the Corps commander wouldn't give me any quarters. Wanted to give me a BOQ room, and I'm not used to living in a BOQ. And I said, secondly, I live off post. And third, I don't have any children playing in the Pop Warner football. You want me to run that thing? I said, that's crazy stuff. He said, they had a scandal in it last year, and you're going to run it. So suck it up and run it. So I did. And I had bought tickets to the University of North Carolina football games. Charlie Justice was playing, or some damn guy was playing. I never saw, well, Justice wasn't playing, but I, because he was earlier on when I was in college, but they had a Cracker Jack football team. I never saw him play a game.
You were out watching your own game.
I watched 30 games a Saturday. And I had a rule then. I said, if I'm going to play football, everybody's going to play football in the party. So we had a little rule there that we had each battalion and the headquarters battery DeVarty, once a month they had to do the work. So that means they had to run the weigh-in, they had to run the keeping book on how many minutes everybody played, lining the field, etc. I learned something from all that, because what happened after a while is the families, since it became a battalion activity, pretty soon families came in from off post and brought their own kids around, and they sort of tailgated it because their husbands were working at this endeavor. And later on, when I would become the TRADOC commander, put an order out that you had to adopt a post activity. 06 had to have one, the battalion had to have one, so that there was some labor and some military skill involved in running post activities. My general view turned out is that later he'd give Malloy one, he gave him a baseball, or gave Elton baseball, and gave Lindsay basketball, but there was something for everybody running one of these activities. But what happened about that is, you see, military people know how to make the rabbit jump in a military environment. Most post civilians know their little piece of it, of how to do a post activity, but they don't have the authority that a military figure has, and they don't know the system, and they don't have the people resources that a battalion has, or a division artillery has, or an infantry brigade has. And so if you are setting up a framework for post support, you want military people at all levels to be part of that. So at the library, you'd like to have a company commander, or a battery commander, or a battalion commander that can go around and say to the post librarian, we don't want to run your library for you, but you need somebody to straighten out your stacks, or you need to clean the place up, or does it need to be painted here today? You know, sort of self-help kind of work. I often thought later on as I grew up in the Army after that particular tour down there, how many people would drive by the child care center and say, you know, geez, the post commander knew what was going on at the child care center, he'd close it down. Because the place is not clean, or it's not sanitary, I've got the right number of light fixtures, or you know, whatever it may be. But there's just something about being a member of the military with a green suit on, or a camouflage suit on, that you know better how to make the rabbit jump in post activities. And Fritz showed me how to do that, and by giving me an order which I didn't like. So that became part of the learning curve of doing work on a post.
Well, you must have had your hands full, commanding the party, running all the live fires, being safety officer.
Everybody had their hands full. Everybody had their hands full. Busy place. Exciting place.
How did it change when the division commanders changed?
No change.
They're very different kinds of guys, though, aren't
Yeah, actually, I didn't work for Tacoperi very long. I worked for him, I don't know when the division change of command took place, but I would estimate I worked for Tacoperi, because that changed, I think, in February. That would have been my 18th month. And February or March at that time. And Tacoperi may have been the division commander for 3 or 4 months.
So there was nothing, no impact on you, no change in the frequency of phone calls?
No, I think they were quite different men and quite different styles of command. I think General Tacoperi was probably more aggressive in terms of getting into the nits and lights of what was going on than General Crozon was, although I always thought General Crozon knew all the nits and lights.
How did we know it from just wandering
Huh?
around? How did he know from wandering around?
He walked around and he listened. I just say to you that people loved him. And they loved him because he gave you this enormous confidence, appearance of confidence. And he gave you the feeling of everything's okay. And so troops came up to him talking to him. You're talking about people coming up and talking to me in the field. They didn't do that, but when Crozon was around or in the garrison or whatever, they come up and talk to him about anything, you know. So he's very comfortable with that, and I think he was a gifted man at that.
Did any of these conversations with subordinates, people end up in phone calls to you?
No. He didn't do that. He just soaked it up. He's the kind of guy, well, I think, let me answer by this. The only rule I had in the diverty was bad news is like a dead fish. It smells more with age. So get the bad news up here and let's deal with it. And obviously we did that with Crozon. I mean, he called him up. I called him. I called him up one day. I was in my headquarters when I got word of this mortar accident. This was preparatory to going out and doing all that. I said, we've had an accident on the range. Got medevacs en route. I can't give you the results. I give you the results when I find out. So I went out in the field and found out. Then I had the point of safety, point of inspection. Person to go out and do a safety investigation, Article 32, and all the rest of the stuff that had to be done about that. Fritz said, as calm as he could be, said, report when you get ready. Wasn't any off-the-wall stuff. So he's a very calm guy. He'd seen everything. He fought in World War II. He fought in Vietnam, commanded a division in Vietnam. He's very comfortable with all that. And so he knew shit happens. And when shit happens, you don't get angry about it. You just sort through it. So he's very comfortable guy to work for. I think, you're talking about whether people call overnight. I think a person who is confident in his ability doesn't care who comes to call, nor where do they come to call, can absorb whatever they find out without getting angry about it or irritated about it. We had a Corps commander whose name was Dick Seitz. He now lives in Junction City, Kansas. Terrific guy. Seitz was a guy that liked to come down and see what you were doing. And he'd drop in anyway. I mean, in the field, I wouldn't be there. I mean, he'd go in the field, we'd be seeing somebody shooting, or I'd invite him to come down to McClellan and walk around and see how we're doing with shooting bullets or whatever. But I mean, I never went around worried about what he was looking at. I mean, I was comfortable. My people are damn good. So if you're comfortable with what you're doing, I mean, you don't worry about who's checking up on you.
Yeah.
It is the insecure person who is, my God, he's got Ziggy Belcher coming around here, got to clean this up, do that. Don't do that.
Yes. Well,
There's a thing called confidence and another thing called competence. And if you are competent, that gives you confidence.
And that chases away insecurity.
You bet. And lowers the tension level.
Yes, and sometimes even competent people can be made unconfident if the tension level is artificially raised. That was what was going on at Fort Ord in 85, 86. It was screwing up the cohort evaluation, or the ability of the cohort system to demonstrate its full virtues. And I was wondering if Major General Tagliamere had jacked up the tension level.
Not that I recall. He's an old airborne guy, so he knew a lot about it. So, and there's sort of fraternity about that. You see, if you go back and look at, sort of how does all that play later when you get in the cohort unit. The 5 years I spent in the 11th Airborne Division was a period of cohortism.
Yes.
NCOs that left the 11th would come back because there was no more division to go to. They would come back and go either the 101st or go into the 82nd. So some of those guys would appear in the 82nd, although a lot of them were in the 101st. The 82nd Divarti was a cohort in its own right.
It was.
One is we didn't get levied very much because we were on the cutting edge of going and jumping off. So, I mean, there was a cohortism. Everybody knew one another in the division artillery. And if somebody went overseas to Korea or Germany, they would come back in the division. It was like coming back home for them. And there were a lot of officers who'd come and gone in the division. I didn't have to be one. I was sort of the outsider coming back in there, but a lot of them had come and gone. Some of them had commanded battalions in there. We'd come back as brigade commanders. Some of them as company commanders come back as, or battery commanders come back as battalion commanders. So, if you look at it, I sort of spent a 7-year period in a cohort environment, a larger connection of a cohort, not specifically oriented at a battery or a company level like we did with the 7th ID, but where there was genuine reliance on competent NCOs and the troops that they trained, who were in the main generally very competent, very comfortable with.
Yes. When I first read about your experiences in that division, your officer outbrief, this is how a division should be done. How it should be run.
You mean with the 82nd?
For the 82nd.
You bet.
And then it seemed like in subsequent assignments, you were seeking to create a situation in which that kind of experience could become more general throughout the Army, through the cohort system and through your emphasis on competence.
Well, yeah, competency, I think, is crucial. I believe that it substantially undergirds confidence, and I believe that confidence is what gets you through difficult situations. And if you don't know how your machinery operates for openers, see, I guess I look at one of the reasons that the armor or the cavalry can be audacious is because they have a set of drills that they go through. And that set of drills means then that if you drill it long enough, then you don't have to worry about knowing what the drills are. You can then concentrate on the task at hand. So my own view about it is that there is a set of drills you have to go through. And if you go through those sets of drills, then you will be able to do better at then applying the factors of MET-T, mission, enemy terrain, troops available, to the task at hand. And if you don't have the drills down right, then you will spend a lot of time rehearsing, not for the new task, but rehearsing the basic skills that you ought to have. Later, when Bill Hartzog and Mike Steele go to Fort Benning as the assistant division commander, I try to get them to, and I'm the TRADOC guy, I try to get them to spend time on infantry battle drill. Now, that's somewhat controversial. Now, I'm not an infantryman, so I don't pretend to be a battle drill guy. But I said there ought to be a half a dozen maneuvers that are standard fare for an infantry guy. You ought to be able to do that at the drop of the hat and make a difference who you are in the infantry. Now, then somebody comes by and says, but everything's MET-T. And I say, yeah, that's right, everything is MET-T. But there's a set of drills that says we dismount the Bradley in a certain way and we work our way through an ambush in a certain way. There's a certain set of skills that you want to make sure everybody's comfortable with, and therefore you want to rehearse it. Therefore you want to teach that in BNOC and ANOC. And that's the reason I go back to that long song and dance I gave you about competency in let's say something like the EIB. The Expert Infantryman's Badge is a series of tests, none of which is the antithesis of a skill that an infantry soldier ought to have. There's not a single one of them that's bad for an infantryman. I mean, there's nothing inherently bad about being an expert in your weapon. Now, if you're not an expert in your weapon, you ought to become one. You ought to be good at something. And so it's a business of not do as I say do, but do as I do. And that's a principle that you want to try to infect other people in. One of the things we did down at Bragg, as a Departy guy, and I didn't invent it, but I certainly kept it going, was the business of live fire. The live fire thing had been invented before I got there, but we kept it going because less adventuresome division commanders wouldn't let it go because it's risky. But if you go through that danger in a peacetime situation where you can control it, you will be much better at it when you get into war where you can't control all of those to the extent that you can. So that, in other words, it's a competency building type. So the incompetency breeds confidence in the ability to do that. It's the whole notion of rehearsal. So those things are important. A scheme of how to train has to be put together to breed confidence in people's ability to do certain tasks. If they get to do those tasks, then you can make it more difficult.
When you decreed that there were going to be gunner's tests, and everybody howled, because they didn't know how to administer them, or didn't know where?
Oh, no. They meant that there was some howling because that meant the troop officers had to go to work. I mean, had to disassemble a breech block, learn to gun it, all against stopwatch, and all those kinds of things, in place a howitzer and all those kind of things. So you had to go down and put your hands on the machinery. See, a lot of people, I don't say a lot of people, some people believe that the higher up you get, the less competent you need to be, and the more generalist you become. My own view, and I've spoken on this when I was a vice, it's too bad we call people generals, so to call them specials. Because when you get to be the DESPER, what we'd really like for you to be is because we gave you the job of being the DESPER, we'd like you to be a very competent DESPER, not just sort of wave your hands around, but be very confident and competent at that particular problem. That's what we're paying for you. This 2 years or 3 years, whatever it is you may do, that's what we're paying you for. A lot of people say, oh, gee, you just got to be sort of a generalist and everybody's good at everything. Well, that's bullshit. Everybody's not good at everything.
Where was the gunner's test laid out? What the tasks were and the criteria?
Those are in the
ATP?
ATP for each particular weapon. So for 105 Oucher, 155, 8-inch, whatever, there's a gunner's test laid out for that. Much like an EIB, there's an EIB test laid out. It tells you what the criteria is.
It's not in an FM, it's in an ATP.
As far as I recall, it is. you're asking me something 20 years ago now, and I just tell you that chemotherapy works on your brains. Anything I can't remember, it's chemotherapy.
Doesn't seem to affect you very much. What about the battery detail and surveying, all that sort of thing? Is there a gunner's test applied there, or is that another?
Well, there were always a series in days gone by. There was, and currently in the soldiers' manuals, there are always tests associated with survey or battery operations, gun operations, howitzer operations, etc., fire direction operations. So there's a series of technical skills for each one of those. But let me give you an example of how this pertains today. If you go to, I'll give you some of my TRADOC experience, sort of leap forward to TRADOC days. When I spent a considerable amount of time at the NTC observing what went there. And one of the things you observe, and I'll give you just one vignette, is that I sort of ran a test on what was the average opening range of TOW missiles at NTC. Now, we bought these things to shoot 3,600 meters. And the improved tow vehicle and the Bradley were out there, and our average opening engagement was 1,700 meters. Now, the principle of purchasing the Bradley and the ITV with a tow missile that shoots 3,600 meters is to pick off the opposing tanks before the opposing tanks get in the range of their own tank weapons, which is more like 2,000 meters. But if I don't open up until 1,700 meters, that means that the other tanks are inside my tank, their tank firing range, and therefore they can bring their own tank fire to bear not only on my tanks, but on my Bradley fighting vehicles, which are thin-skinned, or the improved tow vehicles. So you say, well, geez, I bought this weapon for some purpose. How come it's not being used for that? What's going on here? There's something awry in either the way we've taught the use of the weapon, or there's something wrong with the equipment. There's something wrong with the leadership that doesn't know how to use it. You go down through the doctrine of use, the organizations you may have, the tactics, techniques, and procedures you have, the skill of the people involved in using it, or something wrong with the equipment. You got to find out what's wrong with it, because we bought it for a different purpose. And oh, by the way, it's not a trivial sum of money. We probably got $20 billion tied up in that system. What you find out is you have to go run the rabbit down the rabbit hole until you find out why people aren't using it properly. So, is it because the NCOs don't know how to use it? Because the officers don't know how to use it? Because the equipment's not being maintained right? What the hell is wrong with it? So part of the, when I was a TRADOC commander, I got the armor, or the infantry school. Hartzog was in charge at that time as the assistant commandant. Told him he would put a team together and spend 1 month looking at analyzing data at National Training Center on 50 battalion attacks and 50 battalion defenses. Rub out the bumper numbers. We don't care anything about whether the 2nd or the 35th did any good, or the 15th or the 42nd, or whatever. What we're looking at is what are the trend lines in all this, and what the opening ranges are, and what the effectiveness are about that. So when he came out of that month-long study, we were able to find 10 or 12 things that had to be changed in the training program in order to get the weapon to fire like we anticipated it was going to fire. That's called details in the business. Now, if you go and straighten that out, and if you build confidence about that, you will get something to happen. Now, break. After observing what had gone on the desert floor, after conducting this particular test by having the infantry center go there, I visited a friend of mine in the field who's a brigade commander at Fort Carson, Colorado. And he's down in Pinyon Canyon. And we're out there in the field. It's the 18th day of February, happens to be my birthday, I haven't recall it. Cold as hell, we're out in the field watching a cav unit attack an infantry battalion. After it's all over, the infantry battalion is severely mauled by this cav unit. So I go to the battalion commander, we're having a little after action critique. Now I understand I don't command anything here, right? I'm just a visitor. Friend of mine, commanding the brigade. So I said to the battalion commander, I'd like for you to find out for me how many toes you brought to the field and find out how many toes were engaged in this exercise. So he comes back and he said, we brought 130 toes to the field and we shot 18. Well, the assistant division commander was there. And he said, I said to the assistant division commander, I said, the battalion got beat, and I said, one of the things they didn't do is didn't get their toes in the fight. I said, if I were you, I'd rerun the exercise tomorrow morning. Different piece of terrain, do it over again, see if the battalion commander can learn how to get his weapons in the fight. Reluctantly, the assistant division commander agreed to do that. Now, I didn't have any authority because I'm the TRADOC commander. He reluctantly told the brigade commander, well, why don't you do that? And after the assistant division commander left, I turned to the battalion commander and I said, I'm going skiing tonight and tomorrow. I'm going to give you